juggernaut you will ever meet. Please welcome Bill McKibben.
Wally and Hannah and Graham and Jonathan, what a pleasure to get to join you guys here. And what a pleasure to be in this room. Now, when I walked in, I'll tell you what I flashed on. Young people, a long time ago, there was a musical combo called the Beatles. And they came up in the English port city of Liverpool, and they played in a place called the Cavern Club. That's where they got famous. If you get bored during my talk, you're welcome to go on your phone and Google a picture of it, and you'll see that it's a dead ringer for the place which actually I find really nice, because, you know, I stole the title of this last book of mine, Here Comes the Sun, from the quiet Beatle, George Harrison. So I'm going to just sort of channel my inner Liverpudlian tonight, and as I talk to you. Look, this has been all good news tonight, and now I'm, for a minute, going to bring you down for a minute before I work you back up a little bit, or at least try. Because let's be very clear, we are in a very dark place in a lot of ways. There are two truly horrible things happening in the world right now. One of them is the climate crisis, and it is getting very bad. The things that I was warning about back in the 1980s when I wrote The End of Nature are basically have all played out as scientists said they would. And we're now seeing it someplace around the world literally every day in dramatic form, the floods and fires that now we take so for granted almost that we almost forget about them. I mean, it was 15 months ago that huge parts of the second largest city in this country burned to the ground over the course of a week. And we've sort of memory holed it because so many things have happened since. And of course, those things happen most powerfully and most tragically in the poorest and most vulnerable places on the planet, which also happen to be the places that have done by far the least to cause the crisis from which they are suffering. So always we keep that in mind. And we're going to have to keep it in mind with even more force in the year ahead, because if the meteorologists are even close to correct, the El Nino that will start in June or July will be the largest of its kind we've ever observed. It seems at this point a lock that 2026 and certainly 2027 will be the hottest years we've ever recorded on this planet. The level of chaos will rise. Because we're going to be dealing with temperatures that no humans have ever dealt with before. It won't just be the dramatic floods and fires. We're now doing systemic structural damage to the most important things on the planet. The jet stream draws its power from the temperature difference between the equator and the poles. As we raise the temperature of the poles, the jet stream gets stuck in these high amplitude, weird positions that lead to long sieges of weird weather on either side. A mile to our east in the Atlantic Ocean, the great currents of the Atlantic Ocean, the biggest heat distribution engine on planet Earth, taken together, these currents like the Gulf Stream 100 times the flow of the Amazon River. They're flickering and faltering now in real time as fresh water pours off a melting Greenland and alters the salinity and hence the density of the seawater in the North Atlantic. It's those density differences that drive these giant conveyor belts. We used to think this was a problem for next century. We now think differently. The latest science from last week had the world's foremost expert on all of this, the German scientist Johann Rockström, saying he thought there was now a 50% chance that we would see the collapse of these currents before the century was out. If that happens, it's a civilizational scale event like nothing humans have ever dealt with before. We have very little time to deal with this. The Intergovernmental climate change told us a couple of years ago that if we wanted to stay on anything like the timetable we set out in Paris, we would need to cut emissions in half by 2030, which by my watch is now 3 years and 7 months away. So we have our work cut out for us, even if we were all trying hard, which leads to the second bad thing that's going on this planet, which is a descent of too much of it, led at this point by our own nation into a kind of authoritarian dystopia that makes it very, very hard to deal with any issues, but this one most of all because of the deep, close ties between fossil fuel and oligarchy. And I'm not going to talk at great length about that because we all live it now every day. I'll just say it's extremely, extremely important as we head into the midterm elections to get across to everyone that we can that this is a period of just great abnormality that must come to an end. We've been doing a lot of work at Third Act with some of our oldest members, people in their 80s and 90s, some of whom are too old to get out in the street for protest anymore, but want to stay very engaged. And they've been making videos. If you're 83 now, it means you've been alive for a third of American history. We turned 250 this year, which gives you some kind of baseline credibility to judge just how weird a moment we're in. And so people have been making videos and they're extraordinarily moving to hear someone say, look, when I was 4, my sister died of polio. Do you know how pissed off it makes me to see them messing around with vaccines? And, I mean, we need to be responding emotionally at that kind of level. And if we can, then we have some hope of maybe beginning to take things back. And in that process, and here I switch registers, we have against those two big bad things, one very big good thing happening, so big and so good that it could take a real bite out of both the climate and the authoritarianism crisis, and that is this very sudden rise of clean energy around the planet. Really a story of the last 36 months or so. Now, it doesn't really always seem that way to us because we've been talking about solar energy and wind energy and seeing it for a long time, and there have been great, I've been up on the roof at Brooklyn Solar Works and seen the extraordinary stuff, out across the borough. It's fun to look at. But it's always been, let's be honest, alternative energy, kind of on the margins. And all of a sudden, that isn't true. Last year, more than 90% of new electric generation around the world came from the sun and the wind. Wind power is just another form of solar power. The sun heats the earth differentially, producing the winds that move those majestic turbines. The scale at which this is happening and can happen is just staggering. The Earth is producing about a third more power from the sun this spring than we were last spring. That's how fast we're doing this. This time last spring, the Chinese who are leading in this work put up every day last spring about 3 gigawatts of solar power, a gigawatt, the rough equivalent of a very big coal-fired power plant. So they were doing one of those out of solar panels every 8 hours. That should give us some perspective, okay? When New York State talks about, when Kathy Hochul says it's too hard for us to put up 15 gigawatts of solar power between now and 2035 or whenever their goal is, okay, if that's too hard for New York, that's what the Chinese do in a week with the weekend off, okay? So it highlights just how pathetic her leadership and what's happening in New York has been. Before I say more about that, let me tell you more good news, which is to say, there are lots of places around the world, most places around the world, where this is really starting to happen. California, which took this seriously, has put up enough solar power so that now most days, for long stretches of the day, California produces more than 100% of its electricity from renewable energy, sun and wind. And though it was very good to hear Jonathan say that 93% of New York's power is from distributed energy resources, it's also not good, because what we need in addition are some of those big solar farms that the Californians have built. At night, when the sun goes down now in California, the biggest source of supply to the grid are batteries that spent the afternoon soaking up excess sunshine. They didn't even exist 3 years ago, you know. The speed with which this is moving is amazing, and the numbers that it can produce are amazing. California, forget about adding new frac gas pipelines. California is using 60% less natural gas to produce electricity than it was 3 years ago. Okay? This is the fourth largest economy in the world. If they can do that, those are the kind of numbers that start, we're not going to stop global warming, too late for that, but start shaving tenths of a degree off how hot the planet gets. And every tenth of a degree that we raise the temperature moves 100 million of our brothers and sisters from a safe climate zone to a perilous one. So this remains the most important work. Now, who's now surpassing California at the rate they're doing this? Texas. This is not because of their deep commitment to climate mitigation. It's because the economics are so overwhelming. And you can see that in every kind of place. Some of you know the story of what's happened in Pakistan. Hardest hit of any country on earth by climate change. Routinely now, the summertime urban temperatures can reach 125 degrees in their big cities. 2010 and 2023, they had the two biggest floods on this earth since Noah. Its only geographical advantage is a border with China, across which have flowed extraordinary numbers of these cheap Chinese solar panels. Not a government program, just individual Pakistanis fed up with expensive and unreliable electricity, buying these things and going on TikTok to learn how to put them up. There is just a big genre of TikTok videos with Hindustani music in the background about how you snap together solar panels. In 18 months, they built the equivalent of half the country's national electric grid. Long before events in the Middle East, they last year told their big liquefied natural gas supplier, Qatar, that they were going to pay the penalty and not take acceptance on 24 huge boatloads full of LNG that they had contracted for, because they didn't need them anymore. They were making electricity from the sun instead. It's now happening in the last 6 or 8 months across Africa at an extraordinary pace. You can sort of follow the Chinese trade routes and just kind of see where it's blossoming. The only place in the world where it's happening faster than Africa right now is Cuba, where we have utterly shut off their supply of fossil fuel. And in a desperate bid to keep something going on that island, I'm afraid is going to be too small to counteract what we're doing to them. But they're putting up solar panels now faster than any place on planet Earth. This is exceptionally good news for the climate. It's the first scalable tool that we've had in all the years to work on this that has some chance of making a serious dent in how much carbon actually flows into the atmosphere. But it's good news on lots of other fronts too. 9 million people a year die on this planet just from breathing the combustion byproducts of fossil fuel. We think 100,000 of those or so are in this country, and millions more cases of childhood asthma and things, and we know who gets to live next to the highway or by the refinery or whatever. These are deep issues around justice here and around the world. But the third reason, and the one that just keeps pounding itself into me, is this thing I was mentioning before about power, the other kind of power on this planet. As long as we depend for energy on something that's only available in a few places, the people who control those places are going to have too much money and too much power, and they will abuse it. Vladimir Putin, oil and gas baron of Europe, using his winnings to launch a land war on that continent in the 21st century. The Koch brothers, our biggest oil and gas barons, systematically taking their winnings and undermining American democracy for 3 decades. If you wonder why it was so easy for Donald Trump to knock it over, it's because it had been rotted from the inside over all that time. The king of Saudi Arabia, on and on and on. Think how many wars and coups and assassination attempts would have been averted over the last century had oil been of trivial value in that time. You don't really have to think very hard, because 13, maybe 14 weeks ago, we took over Venezuela. We didn't, to give the president his due, he didn't even pretend that it had anything to do with democracy or human rights. He just said, you have oil, we want it, we're taking it, and we did. And we're now dispatching tankers full of it hither and yon. Venezuela had the second biggest oil reserves in the world. Iran has the third biggest oil reserves in the world. And one of the things we've learned in the course of the last 6 weeks is that, maybe it's not a good idea to be fully dependent on a resource that has to travel down a waterway that no one had ever heard of until March, okay? Sunlight has to travel 93 million miles to reach the Earth, but none of those miles go through the Strait of Hormuz. And so we're seeing in real time what happens around the world as this shock sets in. And what's happening in place after place after place is a sudden and remarkable dash for clean energy. Now, it was already underway for the last 3 or 4 years, as I've been describing, but it has taken a further leap upward over the last month. And by every indicator, I mean, rulers of giant countries like Indonesia announced that they're going to put up 100 gigawatts of solar in the next 2 or 3 years. The president of South Korea said he can't sleep at night trying to figure out where his energy is coming from, and they're going all in on producing their own. But it also is at the level of the individual consumer, apparently, across particularly Asia, where this is hit the hardest. The showrooms of the Chinese EV makers are just absolutely jammed with people wanting to trade in their car or their scooter or whatever it is and get one that runs on something where the price doesn't go up over and over and over again. The US is the one exception to this rule, because we are ruled by a moron, and a moron who has sold himself out to the fossil fuel industry. You will recall that candidate Trump said during his campaign to big oil executives, give me $1 billion, I'll give you anything you want. They gave him about $500 million. That turned out to be plenty. He's done, I think, more than they even expected. I mean, shutting down wind farms off the, not just shutting them down. I was emailing back and forth with my old friend Jamie Raskin, the congressman, today. They've announced an investigation, Jamie Raskin and a couple of his colleagues, of the deal that you might have missed a couple of weeks ago. Turns out that all of us as taxpayers have written a check for $1 billion to buy out the wind leases of companies that paid this money to us for the right. Well, I mean, we're doing it solely to make sure that no one ever harvests this wind off the Atlantic seaboard, so that it just blows as it always has without being captured for human use. That's insane. And so is putting all federal land off limits to solar, and so is subsidizing coal again, and on and on and on. Obviously, before we can make huge progress on this, we have to have some kind of foothold in DC. I'm spending most of my year out I've just come back from the West and headed back again soon, trying to figure out how we win as many seats as we can in Congress and begin the achingly slow process of maybe returning us to some kind of sanity in this country. In the meantime, we also need to be doing this work at the state and local level to make sure that we take part in this revolution too. And you have heard about it tonight. I just want to say it's remarkable how much we're getting done. We had this big event that many of you helped with last September that we called Sun Day. Assemblywoman Gallagher was there in force. And Brad Lander downtown. We had there were 500 events going on in the country, and we were sort of coordinating them from downtown in Manhattan, and it was a beautiful day. And one of the things that came out of that was this kind of blitzkrieg effort to get these solar permitting bills and balcony solar bills on the legislative agenda around the country. It's gone far better than we could have expected, and that really anyone thought it could. We're going to come out of the spring with, I think, 10 states having approved these balcony solar bills, and that will be enough to establish a market around this country, and pretty soon we'll be catching up to the rate at which the Germans are doing it. We're supposed to pass it in my now home state of Vermont next week, which I'm very hopeful we do, because I put in mine a few weeks ago, and it's technically illegal. I've been to jail a number of times, but I would just as soon not go to jail for this, because it's the easiest, most obvious thing on planet Earth, you know. This is the lowest hanging fruit. But it's so beautiful to imagine this city of apartments festooned with solar panels just as a kind of matter of course, and people producing enough energy often to at least run their refrigerator, which is the biggest energy draw in most homes, straight from the power of the sun. Look, I've rattled on here for a while, and I don't want to stay at it. I just want to finish by saying that we've talked correctly tonight about the scientific necessity of all of this and about the economic pragmatism of all of this, which are the things we should be talking about, and they're truly important. But it's also worth just reminding ourselves that there's something deeply beautiful about all of this too. I mean, it's an epochal moment. We suddenly, as of about 5 years ago, live on a planet where the cheapest way to make power is to point a sheet of glass at the sun. That is an amazing change. Humans have spent the last 700,000 years setting things on fire. That's, Darwin said language and fire were what set us apart. And, it worked pretty well, fire, right up through the Industrial Revolution, and it gave us modernity, and on and on and on. But now the cost is too high, including just the basic cost of the climate system on which we depend. So what a beautiful thing that at that exact moment, we suddenly have the ability to do this a completely different way. We haven't known about it for very long. I mean, it was only 1956, and there are people in this room who were alive in 1956. 1956, that at Bell Labs across the river in Edison, New Jersey, that they invented the first solar cell. And it's only taken us 70 years to reach the point where it's ready to replace combustion in what we do. It's a natural fit for us. Humans, well, we don't know how prehistoric people thought about things, because being prehistoric, they failed to write it down. But every pile of rocks that they left behind, like Stonehenge, all point to the solstice or the equinox. The second that humans started making myths in this world, the first thing that they had to explain was, how does this thing rise over here in the morning, set over here in the evening, and get back over here counterintuitively in the morning? And so there are great, endless stories about giant emus that swallow up the sun and vomit it forth at dawn, and on and on and on. And these are beautiful, deep stories that connect completely with us to this day. I was in Rome in September. The new Pope, who, by the way, is a completely bizarrely normal Midwestern American male. If he showed up at your Thanksgiving dinner, you just think your bachelor uncle had wandered in from someplace, but who, in the last few weeks, has done a better job of facing down our idiot president than any other person on planet Earth. He said he got up at this was a conference to mark the 10th anniversary of his predecessor Francis's great encyclical Laudato Si on climate change, the most thorough critique of modernity that we've had, I think, this century. At any rate, he got up and said, we're going straight ahead with all that Francis stuff on climate change. We're going to stay right at it. Indeed, he said, later this year, we're going to flip the switch on this new solar farm that we've built in the suburbs of Rome. And when we do, Vatican City will become the first fully solar-powered nation on planet Earth. So when it was my turn to get up and speak, I said, Your Holiness, that's good. Thank you very much. You're showing us what to do, and you're giving us the slogan under which we will operate from here on out. And it's one that we should be shouting at Kathy Hochul in her Albany fastness there. Energy from heaven, not from hell. That's where we are. Let's do it. Let's go.
So we do have a little bit of time for Q&A. It is about 10 to 8, so we have about 10 minutes for questions. Maybe if some folks can stay a little longer, we could take a little bit. But do we have any questions? I'm just gonna, I'll repeat your question, and then, there's a mic to run? Great. Well, does anybody have, we'll start with hands. Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask?
No, that's the mic. Where's the mic?
Is there a mic to run? No, okay, so just say your question. I'll repeat it so that everyone can hear.
So a third of carbon emissions is from heating of buildings and cooling of buildings. A third of carbon emissions is from transportation. And what is the last third? Why am I blanking?
Industry.
So what Bill talked about was the two that doesn't include transportation, but do you agree with me that with solid-state electric vehicle batteries coming this year and next year, that this is going to transform transportation in a way that solar is transforming energy production? And how does that factor into your thoughts about the future of climate change and maybe a more positive future than we see right now?
The question is this coming for transportation, and how does that factor into your thinking?
Well, I'll take a quick stab at it, because I think you're absolutely right. I mean, look, the reason we want to generate a lot of power from the sun and the wind is because then we can use that power to do the things we need to do. For the average household, the Holy Trinity is in your kitchen, the induction cooktop. You can get them for $60 online. I'm the cook in our household. I've used them for years. I won't tell you how it works. Magnets. It boils water faster than you've ever seen it. And it's not a good idea to have an open campfire in your kitchen, it turns out. Though that's how I raised, when my daughter was young, that's what we had. It turns out your kids are 50% more likely to get asthma if you grow up, which shouldn't be a big surprise when you think about the fact that there is indeed an open campfire spewing stuff in the middle of your house. The second part of that trinity is the heat pump. Incredibly magical technology. It takes latent heat from the atmosphere, adds a little bit of electricity, and then uses it to heat or cool your building. And these have become ubiquitous in many places in the course of just a couple of years. And everywhere. Finland has the highest penetration of them any place in the world, so don't worry that it's too cold in New York or something for them to work. But the third of this trinity is about mobility. The EV is definitely a part of it, and it's one of the reasons why Chinese cities went from being the top 10 dirtiest cities in the world 6 or 7 years ago to being basically as clean air as American cities now. Not only is it cleaner, because more than half the cars in China now come with a plug on the back, and those numbers are much higher in the big urban areas. Not only is it much cleaner, I've talked with lots of people in Beijing and Shanghai in the last 8 months, and they say the thing you really notice is that the city is way, way, way quieter than it was just a year or two ago, because but important as that EV thing is, and solid-state batteries will help. Look, it's still, New York is a perfect example. What we need are lots of transit, and running that, transit on electricity is easy. Electric buses are now the common thing in much of the world, and they should be here before long. And, though I know it's somewhat controversial in New York, the e-bike is really one of the great, remarkable inventions of our time, and useful for more than delivering Chinese food. Okay? In fact, it's going to be more important than the EV around the world. There are hundreds of millions of them now being sold, and the reason is because a bike was already good technology. But now we've invented a bicycle that has no hills. And that is a true, hills have been an obstacle for human beings from the beginning. Getting your body and your stuff up and down elevation was a problem. And it's not a problem anymore. A penny's worth of electricity will take you 5 miles. So all these things together start to allow us to imagine a world that works much, much better than the one that we're currently seeing, and much, much more cheaply. And just to give you a sense about the cheaply part, because the affordability thing is crucial, and here's how we should be helping people think about it. In places that have put up a lot of solar power, for instance, Australia, where 40% of homes have solar panels on the roof, there's now so much cheap electricity that beginning on the 1st of June, all Australians will get 3 free hours of electricity every afternoon, whether they have a solar panel or not. So that's when they're going to be running their dishwasher. They'll figure out how to use the timer on their washing machine. So they'll charge their EV, and everybody's buying storage batteries so they can fill up between 12 and 3 and run their house on free electricity all night. Think about what you get for everybody when you do that kind of planning and work. And then think about how disgusting it is that Albany always says, let's take another year to think about this, no matter what it is that you're talking about. We're out of years, okay? That's the point. So that's why what people are saying about calling your legislature, showing up in Albany, whatever, is so important. We've actually got to do this now, and we can do it now. All these technologies are mature enough to allow us to really take full advantage of them.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I do think we are out of time. So thank you. I'm sorry we only had time for one question, but it happens. No, it's all good. And but of course, if you'd like to stay, if you have questions that you want to ask 350 Brooklyn members or maybe some of our folks here from our representative, and then maybe we can stick around, grab some more food, and please stay tuned for more actions and hopefully some good news very soon.